Hard work, work. There you go.
Falling.
Hard work, hard work. Hard work, hard work. Hard work, work. There you go.
Falling.
Hard work, hard work. Hard work, hard work. Hard work, work. There you go.
Falling.
Hard work, hard work. Hard work.
Falling.
Hey, what's good? What's good? What's good? What's going on? High speeds and high speeds. That you know who it is. It's me, Trey the Commission. You rocking with your favorite vets on the net. First formation, morning sports talk. So come on and fall in and with us as we. I'm not keeping y'all too much. I got a couple of appointments to get to today, but I had to come on and touch and reiterate some things which we talked about yesterday, as well as what we're going to be, as well as some other things. So definitely not too long, just enough to wet your whistle, and so we can get up and get it in, get up out of here, and go on about our day. So first and foremost, which I think definitely deserves to hear some stuff is last night, as stated, as advertised. Well, maybe not so much. Depending on what side of the spectrum you're on, when it came down to watching the WNBA's Commissioner Cup that was played in Las Vegas, Nevada yesterday. Interestingly enough, which was the Las Vegas Aces home court. But in retrospect, there was a lot that was going on. So of course, as we talked about yesterday, it pitted the number one team from the top record from the WNBA. Correction, let me backtrack a little bit. So of course, what happened is the tournament was a 10-game tournament that was played in the season, in the regular season of the women's schedule. So what ended up happening is versus the East versus the West. As we know, there are 6 teams in each conference. The top 2 scores within those 10 games that was designated as Commissioner Cup games got the number one spot or a berth into the Commissioner Cup finals, and that's where we were. So of course, what ended up happening is I believe the Liberty were 7-3, I think, in those 4 games. I mean, in those 10 games, and the Las Vegas Aces were 9-1 in their 10 games, which of course put them in the championship amongst each other, battling everybody. So of course, when you start to look at the lay of the land, when you look at it, the Liberty had just came 10 days ago, had knocked off the Las Vegas Aces by the tune of a 45-point drubbing, right? So of course, when you look at it in state and take a look at, the idea was that they were going to come back basically with a vengeance. Let's just be real. That was the expectancy that the last year's WNBA champions, being the Las Vegas Aces, was going to take care of business. They had already before won a Commissioner Cups themselves, of course. During that time frame, star player A'ja Wilson was the Commissioner Cup WNBA Commissioner Cup MVP for that game, as they knocked off the Chicago Sky with, I might say, a Candace Parker. So it was definitely, the expectation was that we was going to probably see a repeat or something like that. Not so fast, my friend. In the words of Corso, it didn't go down like that. For a second, it seems like everyone was trying to get their jitters out. There was, for the first 2 to 3 minutes, it was 0-0. And then at some point, the Liberty became hot. Forward, what's her name? Let me think of her name. Johannes got the hot hand, 17 points off the bench for the Liberty, which of course wasn't expected, I'm believing, which I think, in my opinion, set the tone and kind of like gave the cushion. The Liberty did relinquish the lead by halftime, down by I think 2 points, as the Las Vegas Aces came back in grand fashion. Came out the second half, a hot hand from excuse me, from Jackie Young, as she contributed with I think 10 points in the third quarter. So it really looked like, okay, this is going to be a game. And that the Aces can probably do some work, put in some work. But in state, it became a whole different story late in the second, at the beginning of the fourth, as Sabrina Ionescu knocked down 2 3-pointers that kind of like turned the tide to begin the fourth quarter. And then it was just on from there. It was just a dominance throughout the game. Of course, the MVP, WNBA Commissioner Cup's MVP, Jonquel Jones, did her dirt as she ended up finishing with 16 points, 15 rebounds, and 2 blocks to earn her the Commissioner Cup MVP, a former league MVP herself. Jones just put in that work. She was a problem on the boards, disrupting shots. It didn't help the simple fact that the key players from the Aces wasn't really there, honestly, when you look at it. Asia Wilson didn't really contribute to anything. Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray stayed the bench and only came in spurts. Of course, I was trying to figure out how Clark was why did she have the green light, because it's like she put up everything she touched. Who else? It was just so what boggled me is when I said watched it is how did these two organizations come upon the players in which they have to be competitive. Like, these are the top 2 teams on the Liberty. Of course, you have Vandersloot, you have Ionescu, who was drafted, of course, Vandersloot, Jonquel Jones, Brianna Stewart, Johannes is a whole European League champion, as well as the European League MVP. So they're loaded to the teeth for the Liberty. I guess speaking to why they have the second best record in the WNBA. And then, of course, we know the Aces with Clark, Wilson, Plum, Young, Gray, and then, of course, someone we didn't get a chance to mention because they're injured currently or they're out, Candace Parker. So these two teams, of course, built their organizations by sustaining some wit and grit through their free agency, and now puts them in position to where they are who they are. Now we're looking like it's on a crash course for the WNBA championship to potentially be the Liberty versus the Aces, or not. I don't know. Things could change possibly. I don't know. But they are the top 2 teams right now. And it's looked like they're on a crash course to basically have to knock each other off in state. You know, it's different for the NBA WNBA, as opposed to, yes, they play in conferences, but all 8 teams are put into one pool and they go 1 through 8, the best, regardless of conference. Regardless of the conference. And we'll see what that's going to look like. So definitely the conference champions, and then the next 4 at large. The next 10 at large would build their playoff pool. Not too many games left, so we'll see. I do know for a fact that on Thursday, the Aces and Liberty will face off again in Las Vegas. And then they're due to meet, I think, at least one more time before the end of the season. So last night's game basically didn't count for anything except for the person earning the Commissioner's Cup. The stats don't count. The points don't count. And none of that counts. It was basically an exposition game that earned earned bragging rights, as well as though there was over $140,000, I think $160,000 earned for charities throughout the course of the tournament, as well as a split of funds or compensation for the players, as well as the trophy. So it wasn't for naught. There was a compensation to the teams as well as additional charities to go out there. 10,000 additional dollars to the charity of choice for the champion, and 5,000 to the runner-up on top of what it was earned. So it didn't go for naught, and it look forward to seeing it for years to come. So that segues directly into the NBA, of course. So yesterday, if you was paying attention, the National Basketball Association announced their in-tournament season as we get closer and closer to where now we know who's going to start the season off to the kickoff. Now we know the in-tournament schedule and who will be playing and how in the breakdown, and soon we will know the overall schedule, so you can go ahead and get your tickets for your favorite organizations as it come up. So of course, with that being said, like I said, the NBA has announced their in tournament, which now it's interesting enough. It comes down. So it was interesting let me bring this up just so to give it a so we can know. Hold on. 1 second. Changes coming. Everything gonna be alright. Okay. As I get ready to share my screen. Oh man, come on, bro. I guess I'm having a little technical difficulties. 1 second. So the NBA, I guess you could say, used the WNBA as the test. I was gonna say test dummy. Used the WNBA as the testing to test it out, and in-state is what they basically came up with. Is the product in which once I get this to work properly, I can sit up and show it. I'm sorry. Why is it not showing? If I can't get it this way, I'm going to do it another way. Okay, I'm just going to have to do it. So try to get my graphic to come up. But I understand. Or maybe this was the issue. There it goes. I'm so sorry. So as y'all see, I'm sorry about that, the little disconnect. So as you see, of course, here, top 30 teams, all 30 teams divided into 6 groups of 5 teams, and the groups basically are determined based on prior season's regular record. So what they did, from my understanding as I read up on it, is they took all 30 teams and divided them into 6 pots, in which they took the top, or was it 5 pots? I think it was 5 pots, in which they put 1 through 3 from each division in one pot. In the second pot, they put 4 through 6. In the third pot, they put 7 through 9. In the fourth pot, they put 10 through 12. And in the last pot, so 5 pots, they put 13 through 15. And with that, they basically randomly selected. What's going on, Jay Ness? What's going on, bro? I'm gonna have to hit you up, man. I'm gonna have to hit you up. So what they did after that is they took those two pots, and through those 2 pots, what they end up doing is randomly selecting teams out of each pot that basically gave them the groups in which sit in front of us now. So two conferences still, three groups that are going to play their tournament between November 3rd to November 28th, I believe it is, or 24th, somewhere around that time. Basically playing Tuesdays. So for the month of November, Tuesdays and Fridays are going to be the tournament games, which still count towards the regular season schedule. Those are going to be the in-tournament games. And then ultimately what's going to happen is after that final game is played, they're going to take the seeded teams, the top records. So as you know, there's going to be four games in which they're going to take the top group, the top groups champions, and then they're going to put them into the tournament, as well as two at large, which is basically two teams that had their top that didn't get in, that didn't win their pool, but they were the top teams, and they're going to have the quarterfinals, and then of course from there regular tournament until the semifinal games are going to be played at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, as well as the championship. So that's going to be December 7th as well as December 9th. And basically that's what the tournament is going to look like. So when you look at this, of course, broken down differently, of course, now that I'm here in San Antonio, I would love to be able to go see the Lakers in that tournament versus the San Antonio Spurs, but that's not the case. But I'm very sure I'll be able to see them anyway once the tournaments are broken down. I mean, once the game on schedule is put out. But of course, looking at this, the Western Conference Group A, made up of the Grizzlies, the Lakers, the Suns, the Jazz, and the Trailblazers. Group B in the West, the Nuggets, Clippers, Pelicans, Mavericks, and Rockets. Group C, of course, is the Kings, Warriors, Timberwolves, Thunder, and Spurs. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, looking at it, the Eastern Conference is made of the 76ers, Cavaliers, Pacers, Pistons, and Hawks. The Milwaukee Bucks, the Knicks, Heat, Wizards, and Hornets make up the Group B. And lastly, Group C is the Celtics, Nets, Raptors, Bulls, and Magic. So looking at these groups, right, my first impression is the expectancy was not to have groups that are, I guess, made up of pure dominance that are offsetting. So that's kind of hard to do, I think, in retrospect, because the seeding goes off last year's records, but that doesn't mean that's going to be this year's play, especially after the first month or so. So we could be looking at something different. So of course, looking at it, I think the West A group is probably the most. Is probably the hardest group. Is going to be one of the harder groups, in my opinion. Of course, when you look at taking consideration, the Grizzlies, they're going to be without Ja Morant. But the Suns, the Jazz, and Trailblazers, well, actually, you know what? They're probably pretty similar for the most part, looking at it. Although I think the East Bucks team, the East B group, is going to be a pretty hard group, I think, out of the East. Potentially the A as well, but definitely the B. And in the West, I think the C group might have some potential to be problematic. But in state, that's what they have. Of course, again, I'm not going to say gimmick, just another way to keep it. Okay, I see JNS that said the C to be a sleeper. I don't know. Definitely, when you look at the Celtics as the new addition to Porzingis, that's going to probably do some work. Newly invigorated Jaylen Brown after his Supermax contract, might sit up and bring in something. The Bulls are still going to be lacking in certain areas, of course. But the Magic, I think, of course, is a sleeper team. The Raptors, I think, ideally still remain a sleeper team. And the Nets, although they are full of players that are under the radar. I still don't know about their meshing and how they'll mesh well, and if they'll be able to put forth that. But I can see your point, Jay. How it could be. Yes, the Nets will surprise people, and I was about to say that, especially when everyone is solidified and they're there. And you know what? Maybe I was on the Best of Seven podcast, if y'all didn't catch it, with Seven Mitchell, in which with some of the conversation we had was in reference to Ben Simmons. So definitely, as like Jay Ness was just talking about, the Nets can be a problem, especially if Ben Simmons comes back and is the Ben Simmons in which we initially seen. If Ben Simmons comes back and playing ball, he has Bridges there, he has Johnson there, he has a couple of other. They've moved on from the nucleus in which they have. Still have Claxton, so they could probably be, as is always, a middle of the road team in the East. We talked yesterday, as we talked yesterday. We talked yesterday with CC or the People's coach, Cornelius Cole, was on the show yesterday, in which we discussed and talked a little briefly yesterday, and discussed and talked about how the East has always been less inferior to the West when it comes to talent. While for the West is dominant when it or is a problem amongst each other. SEC type tactics where the Big 10, Big 12, where top teams beat up on each other, and then someone emerges, and which makes it harder for someone, as opposed to the other side of the spectrum. There's only a couple of dominant teams, and they tend to gouge each other, and then it's a lesser road travel. So that is the same, in my opinion, in the East when it comes down to its teams. So basically, what we got, and what you look at it is, it's going to be a little less travel. So I think the Nets, based off that, is definitely I think based off that is definitely what we're going to basically be seeing is that these teams are going to be smacking each other, and with it not just conference, not just division led, but a mixture of divisions due to records, is going to probably bring up some interest. So Jay Ness says, this is what I'm interested in: how the coaching staff will handle this in-season tournament. Will we see the top players playing, or will you just turn into a two-way and bench roster with the stars sitting out? So I think I think, Jay, is that it's business as usual. It's because these games count towards the regular season schedule. The only games that do not count are the games, I believe, is maybe the tournament portion of it, or at least the tournament portion doesn't count. So the quarterfinal, semifinal games are the ones that don't count towards the schedule, or maybe they do, because you can't really dictate who's going to play when or how they're going to play. So those games don't count. However, this does count. So with that being said, I think they're going to play business as usual. What it may come down to, and the end state is, it's still money. You know what I'm saying? It's still something to go after. It's just the schedule doesn't count, and but everything else is good to go. The stats, I don't believe, don't count either. So I think it's going to still be business as usual. They're going to continue to play games as usual because these games count. Now, when you get to the tournament, I don't think is a reason. Now, they may not be, especially with it not counting towards anything when it comes to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals. They, of course, in the finals, they'll probably be like, okay, we're going to go ahead and run it. But the other ones, they're probably going to be like, it's going to dictate what's going on, because if you have somebody that's sitting out, if you have a KD that's been mint on the men, I don't think they're going to bring him back or rush him back to play in the semifinal of a tournament, in-season tournament. That's not going to count for anything for them. On the opposite side of the spectrum, the other those 4 games in which you're playing is going to make a difference. So that's just my opinion. That would be me. Yeah, so it makes it so it's similar, in my opinion. It's similar to that of the WNBA Commissioner's Cup, in which I believe, of course, we know the WNBA is a subsidiary to the NBA, just as the G League, Basketball with Borders, or the the basketball African League and all that type of stuff. Also, still race to the to the NBA. So I think basically that was the test pilot, and they figured it out. Look at it, of course, tweaked it a little bit to fit their brand, and then now this is what we're going to be looking at going forth to see if it works or not. So I'm interested. I was kind of a little skeptical looking at it initially, but now taking into consideration how they're doing it and building it, I'm interested to see how this is going to go. Basically, only a month and a half for the most part, or roughly a month in which it's doing, and it's early in the season for the most part, just getting in just before the All-Star break in the mid-season trade deadline, and basically just a little added. So on the marketing aspect, I like it as they're trying to do something different, invigorating, give some innovative to it. But I stand pat to see what it is the players are going to say, because only a select amount of individuals are going to be faced with extra games within the season, because they're going to be playing the semifinal, the quarterfinal, and the championship game that don't count for anything except a couple of coins in their pockets and bragging rights. So yes, definitely it'd be interesting to check out. So shifting gears a little bit, like I said, I didn't plan to be on with y'all too long planned time frame, but of course we will go where the river takes us, and if it goes a little longer due to dialogue and conversation, let's rock with it. So moving into, let's say, the NFL, a couple things in the NFL, right? So first and foremost, if you haven't been around, if you wasn't checking, the Indianapolis Colts have named their starting quarterback for the 2023-24 season, as now they're going to basically be rocking with Anthony Richardson, number 4 overall drafted quarterback in this past draft. They have gone ahead and named him as the starter for their season. Now, of course, surprising in my opinion, especially with Anthony Richardson only played a quarter and a half in the first preseason game, to where now, of course, like I said, don't want to tap a man's pockets, but I don't know. Anthony Richardson only looked a little better than Trey Lance, and Trey Lance didn't look good at all. So what is Steichen, who is their head coach now, former OC for the Philadelphia Eagles, what exactly are they seeing to where they decide to name him the starting quarterback for their upcoming season? With this decision, now the Indianapolis Colts have now, or are on pace to start a new quarterback for the 8th consecutive year in their franchise history, right? 8 consecutive years. Of course, the number 1 overall goes to the Chicago Bears. I think they had 9 consecutive starts back in the day, just before 2016. But this is where that's where they're at now. Anthony Richardson, not saying that he's not has the ability, and I guess it's a double-edged sword, because what I see and what I'm ascertaining is that what's going to happen is they're going to go forth. Now they can go forth with planning and game planning around Anthony Richardson directly, and figuring out how they're going to move forth so he can get acclimated. Of course, Gardner Minshew stated that he was disappointed, but he realizes who Anthony Richardson is due to the fact of where he was drafted, and they're basically getting him in there. Anthony Richardson, on the other behalf, has taken a look at it. He said he was surprised, right? Which I was too. But he said he was surprised. He said he did expect to be that person, just not so soon. So now what has happened is he's been put into the position to grow. I know the weight of a new player given the reins early, or versus that player waiting behind and seeing what and watching and learning are go different ways for different people. Some people think, hey, throw them into the fire, baptized by fire, OJT, and getting that type of stuff. which in some terms that works, that helps. In other ways, people think like, no, let's not damage that individual. Let's not put them out there too early. Let them learn. So I think that helps for the most part, especially when you have players that are sitting behind somebody of notoriety that they can definitely learn from. Of course, they can learn from anyone, honestly, not to say that if there was a lesser talent or then somebody like a Gardner Minshew versus a Aaron Rodgers or something like that, because there's something to be learned from everybody because they're all professionals. But still coming in, you would think that that would have been the case, or at least there would have been a little more opportunity. I know one of the things that was talked about is they were high on his ability to come back, and his while he came back from throwing the interception, when he came back for the next few drives, some of that they liked the resiliency and how he handled that supposedly, and which put him in position to basically be named as the starter come the beginning of the season. So come week 1, if that is the case, if Anthony Richardson is under center at the beginning of the game, then he will be the 8th quarterback consecutively, the 8th consecutive quarterback to start this year. So 8 years in which they have been searching for the answer to Andrew Luck leaving their organization 8 years ago, or I guess 7 years ago. Of course, when you look at it, they had a few. Carson Wentz was under center at one point. Phillip Rivers was under center for them at one point. Of course, we know Phillip Rivers retired last year. So this is where we're at with it going forth. Additionally, another situation going on in with the Ravens, right? Before we get to the last one, which I want to talk about. The Ravens are buying into the in Lamar we trust situation. Not necessarily maybe just Lamar, but their quarterbacks in general. So what has happened is our new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, is taking in consideration what his $260 million quarterback has to say, because it is reported that Lamar Jackson has came up with a couple of plays that he thinks that will be conducive, that could work. And his offensive coordinator are taking these plays and looking at them and has implemented them into the offensive playbook. So now what we see is the ideal of their quarterback seeing things and having the opportunities and the ability to audible and change plays as deemed if he feels necessary is being instituted into their organization. So as a quarterback or as a top player in this league or on your team, what do you think if you're in, which is not uncommon. I'm very sure it happens a lot, but for Lamar Jackson, this is a first. Now he has an opportunity to go ahead and audible to what he deems necessary or change plays if he sees something different. That has to be empowering for a quarterback, especially of his caliber, and knowing that type of especially when you take into consideration Lamar Jackson is electrifying. And of course, he can turn just about any play, in which I've always said, no broken play. A broken play is hard to stop. There's no defense for a broken play. You only can hope to where, of course, you get a player of Lamar Jackson's caliber outside the tackles and running around open in the field and have the option to take the ball down the field or direct his receivers here and there while he's open and having a split opportunity where seemingly he is most effective at. That's where he's most effective at. Now he has that opportunity. So shout out to Coach Todd Monken, offensive coordinator, for allowing, listening, and implementing that. End state is if it doesn't work, then you got to take that in consideration. It was something that was tried, and hey, let's keep it pushing on to the next. So same for this topic. On to the next when we talk about the NFL. As we thought, as you know, yesterday, myself and Cornelius spoke in reference to the Michael Orr situation, to where if you haven't heard, Michael Orr has put forth a lawsuit suing what he thought was his adopted family in the Tuohys, that being the family that was depicted in the movie The Blind Side, in which Michael Orr was the subject of that movie. So he's put forth a lawsuit because he's saying that he was tricked into signing paperwork in which he thought he was becoming an adopted child of that family, in which he said it was a paperwork that gave the Tui family conservatorship over him, in which afforded him to have power of attorney over making decisions when it comes down to business and stuff on his behalf. And then they, of course, use that to get the rights to do the movie. What's good, Commissioner Myers? Glad to have information with us, sir. I know you were enjoying that lifestyle, that DD214 lifestyle, and putting work in for the NBA. So basically he's put that into a lawsuit saying that they've done all that to where only the four of them, that being the mother, the wife, the husband, and their two biological children, to earn the money. So yes, sir, I know it. Waking up, not knowing what to do, just walking through the house. I know that feeling. I remember that feeling. So now putting it into perspective, the Tuies, as stated, they initially, when it first was reported, or when it was reported about the lawsuit, they didn't come on initially and give a statement. They basically, the statement would say they would respond in the coming weeks, which it didn't take too long. Cornelius spoke about it yesterday. He basically put forth and stated that he believes that they're basically talking to their legal team and figuring out what it is they're going to do, and how they come back stating that basically what is going on is Michael Orr is, how I foresee it is, Mr. Tui. Oh yes, definitely. I get you. I know. I definitely know what you're talking about. It's just my work came in a little later, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I see y'all working over there from the NBA standpoint, putting in work, setting up for next year. Philly, stand up in the building. So they basically came back and stated that Michael Orr is, from what Mr. Tui said, shaking them down. So it's almost like they're stating that Michael Orr is trying to extort them, and has came back and said if he doesn't get paid $15 million, that he is going to put out the story in reference to them and not being a part of their family, not being adopted, and yada, yada, yada. So looking at this, right, it's crazy because in courts of law, all you have to do is be able to tell a better story than your adversary to earn a judgment. Now we have it to where we're hearing Michael Orr saying that he did not sign the proper paperwork. He was not. He has been bamboozled, and led astray from believing that he was a part of their family, and that they have been taking advantage of that situation at this point. That he unknowingly or signed paperwork in reference to giving them full autonomy to work on his behalf, especially when he was not mentally or physically impaired. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have the Tui family stating that he is basically trying to shake them down to earn $15 million, to get paid $15 million for him to be quiet. So in both cases, potentially, this is some pretty galvanizing information to state that to say these things about one another, especially in the public eye. So now, just like Commissioner Myers was saying, it's proof in the pudding. Do they have adoption paper? Michael Orr, from his assertion, as we've seen or if I read the articles, has stated that basically he had a lawyer that went and found the paperwork and these contracts to back up what he's saying about the fact that they received money and they've been receiving money, and that yet he has not received a dime at this point. Michael Orr said he has that. Just like Commissioner Myers just stated, simple enough. Produce the paperwork that says you were or are filed paperwork. We know, saying courts. Now, I don't know. They might be there. They had money prior to Michael Orr being a part of be a part of all this. So they might have people that can produce stuff and make things go away. I don't know. That's all speculation, of course, when it comes to dealing with individuals that are pretty wealthy. But it's just simple. Produce the paperwork that says, hey, this is what's going on. This is who. This is what happened. He is or is not our child. We did legally adopt. If you can't produce that paperwork, then now we go into some other stuff. Commissioner Myers says pay him, make him sign an ND, no story, and get it out the way. Although I have heard that NDs are hard to hold up in law, depending on the situation. But yes, true enough, pay him, come up with an agreement, give him the money that he's looking for, and just save it. But at this point, I think it's out the bag. Or just like the same thing in court, it has been put out. Public opinion starts to take the court of public opinion is going to start to run rampant, and whatever the perception of the Toohey family and this movie was is going to now be tarnished, I guess. But I mean, in-state is already been. Sandra Bullock already has her Grammy for it, although she doesn't have anything to do with it. She was just an actress, and she only acted out what was put in front of her. Of course, we know usually movies, histories, and the saying based on true events. Movies and shows aren't always, for the most part, fully that true. There's only inserts of it used, and there's dramatization put in there for the simple fact of entertainment. Although I'm very sure there's some stories out there that there's no dramatization needed, although it may put some people, incriminate some people. Either way, Sandra Bullock is still great. She played her role. Correct. And you're so right, Commissioner. And like I said, she has nothing to do with that. She played the role that was put in front of her. She didn't write the script. She didn't go forth and do the research to find out if it was true. She just played the role that was put in front of her, earning her award in state. Can't fault her. But now we have it out there. And like Cornelius brought up yesterday, why was it that Orr waited so long to do this? And so for me, when I look at it, just different, just looking at just anti-advocate to the situation, was it because he was caked up and he was making the money because he was still playing and he had just signed that extension, and now that he's retired, it's starting to wane a little bit and now he's doing it? Or is it the situation to where he didn't have time due to he was trying to focus on his career? And now he got time today because he's no longer playing and he's tired of it, but he's given the opportunity. Like, what is it? So in so many ways, I guess we're going to see it unfold because it's already unfolding. Or do we get a point to where they go ahead and then, like, we're just going to go ahead and settle this in court behind closed doors and do away with that, so that way it's no longer in the public eye. And this is basically airing out family business for the most part. That would be like if there was a breakup of the big 3 or 4 in the NBA, and now they're airing it out. They're coming on first formation and going on different avenues to air it out. You know what I'm saying? This is family business. You take care of that amongst each other. You figure it out, and then you'll go from there to save, reputation stuff. Everything doesn't need to be aired out or need to be talked about. However, sometimes people tend to go that route because they feel like they're not getting where they want to get or where it should be. So that's basically what it comes out to be. And last but not least, so the last thing which I'm going to talk about before we get out of here, hopefully it carries me to at least an hour mark. The NCAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association football. So as we seen a couple of things that came up, two different topics. I started with the first one, basically saying that what we have is they came up. Um, what has come up? They came up with a top 100 NCAA players. Uh, 1 second. So, I'm sorry. So what has happened is the NCAA came up with the top 100 players in NCAA for this year in the college football season. In which last week they just named the top 10. So going with that top 10, they have of course defensive end or defensive edge from Georgia, the sophomore Mikal Williams at number 10. At number 9, Jared Verse, defensive lineman from Florida. At number 8, Jordan Travis, senior quarterback for Florida State. At number 7, Blake Corum, running back from Michigan. At number 6, Michael Penix Jr., quarterback for the University of Washington, a senior. At number 5, Drake May, quarterback, North Carolina, sophomore. At number 4, Harold Perkins, linebacker from LSU. He's a sophomore. At number 3, Marvin Harrison junior wide receiver from Ohio State. At number 2, Brock Bowers, tight end from Georgia, and the top player in college football right now from per ESPN is Caleb Williams, quarterback, USC junior, last year's Heisman Trophy winner. So now stating that, right, in that top 10, there are 4 quarterbacks that are in that top 10. A junior, two seniors, and a was it a sophomore? A sophomore, right? So with that being said, I wonder what is going to be the outcome of that. So top 10, if that was to hold fast and you continue to have the 10 of them be top tier players, of course, when it all comes out to awards, that means at least the top 3, potentially top 4 can be Heisman Trophy winners. And let's just say Caleb Williams wins yet another Heisman Trophy, his second in consecutive years for the USC Trojan. Again, I know we've had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, about a month or so ago, but where is it currently after just this past year where all these kids went moved on and these quarterbacks, the top 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round, I believe, or 3 taken in the first, and then 1 early in the second? Where do you have room for 4 quarterbacks potentially? Although that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be starters, but of course, top tier caliber. You have a 2-time potential Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. Where would he go? I'm just wondering sensibly, where would he go in state when I look at this? Does he get picked up by organizations for him to sit behind somebody and learn? And then, like I said, you have May, you have Penix as well. And then you have Travis as well from Florida State, North Carolina, Washington, USC. Where do these guys end up going to play ball for the most part, or being drafted? Of course, we're just looking like most likely Caleb will be the number 1 quarterback to be drafted this year, unless someone just comes on strong. But not saying that anyone's going to come into play, but it's going to probably be less than likely that they're going to have that situation. Where do these quarterbacks go? I think we talked about it before. When you look at the breakdown, some teams, it could be a situation to where some of these might just be a draft and stash to basically learn. As we talked about, Ideally, Aaron Rodgers only has a couple of more years on his contract, so potentially someone could be drafted to be his predecessor. Being that fact that Zach Taylor wasn't the best in a conversation. Uh, I don't see that happening in the likes of places like San Francisco that made an honestly seemingly similar situation decision, but now they have Brock Purdy, who was considerably young. So unless Brock Purdy was just to show that he wasn't that person and that it was a fluke from last year, that'd be different. Taking a look at, or maybe Jordan Love, Arizona, I guess, coming up on that to where maybe their player wasn't the best. Tampa Bay, I guess, is out there still as we look to see if it's going to be Kyler Trask or Baker Mayfield. What's good? What's going on? Saturday, glad to have information with his brother. How's your morning going? Additionally, I guess there's a few out there. You still got the but Mac Jones, fairly new. Tua Tagovailoa, fairly new. Daniels just got signed. So there's not too many, let me rephrase, there's not too many starting positions that are available for these up and coming players out of the NCAA. And to be a top rated player potentially to go and sit behind somebody. You already have a two-time champion in Stetson Bennett, and he's sitting behind Matthew Stafford in Los Angeles currently, presumably for the most part. If he's able to stay on that roster, so you have that already. So maybe that could be the outcome of some of these players. But right now, that's basically where it's at. So when I was looking at that, I looked at that. I was like, four of the top 10 are quarterbacks, and that's not to even say that there's not quarterbacks in the other 90. I didn't even go look at that yet. In which of like this, and then not to mention that some quarterbacks just come out of nowhere. You don't know. Hendon Hooker came out of nowhere. You still have the quarterback from LSU. I can't think of it. Slips my mind at this time. And then the quarterback from Kansas State. Like there's some quarterbacks that was doing pretty good last year. Injuries took effect. You still got Rattler, who came on strong late for South Carolina. He's still playing, so he might make a difference. DJ Ugalea was no longer in Clemson. He's going on. I think he's in Oregon State or something like that. He might have a reemergence and have a game. So all it takes is one season for the most part, in which these people could have a turnaround. So it's just some things to take into consideration that I was looking at. But real quick before we get ready to get out of here, going back into the NCAA. So with the imploding of the Pac-12, I guess you can say, there has been a large now what comes into play. Let me preface it as that. Now what comes into play is the simple fact that the CFP is due to reformalize or be reformatted for the 2024 season, which in turns, instead of being 6 teams, 4 teams, and then 2 at large, now we're going to a 12 teams format to where 6 conference champions and then 6 at larges, right? So, of course, when you look at that, some of the reason for this extension of that format was to give our opportunity to presumably the West Coast teams that really don't get any eyes on, and was able to try to put them in the eyes of everyone to give them an opportunity to be able to compete for a championship. Because the eye test was usually always passed for those that was under the radar and it just wasn't the dominant ones. So now that this format was put in place to do that, but then not even 6 to 8 months later, you have the implosion to where USC and UCLA are, along with Oregon and now Washington, are going to the Big 10, and then Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah are going to the Big 12, and with leaving only 4 teams in the Pac 12, being Oregon State, Cal, Stanford, and I think Washington State. which I'm very sure the Pac-12 is not going to remain as just a Pac-4. And I'm very sure they're going to be divvied up, or they're going to be even one. They're going to bring in teams from other conferences, or maybe get some teams that are able to formulate into the Division One and bring them in for a competition aspect, or they're just going to send them on about their way and go into other places. As currently the ACC and California and Stanford have been in conversation in reference to them joining their conference, probably for 2024, 2025. But in any case, this is seemingly becoming a problem when you look at it, because the CFP was restructured to take in consideration and give teams on the Western Coast a opportunity. Now, the Pac-12 wasn't the only team conference in which was affected by this, because of course you have the MACs and the WACs and all that type of stuff, in which, saying Fresno, Boise State, in which you can sit up and talk about some of those teams that were that have been dominant in the West, but wasn't given a chance. Utah State, BYU, teams of that and like that. But now that it was formulated, where do you go from here? Is it sensible to go ahead and chill for a second, wait to formalize, and then go back and create a format that's going to be conducive to that? Because at this point now, it's not going to be the same, or you're going to afford an opportunity for a team that should not be in playoff to be in the playoff. Or it could go both ways, but in my opinion, it's less than likely if you was to get a Stanford in, because they're going to be the dominant team in the Pac-12 with everyone gone, and they run up against a Penn State and get annihilated in the tournament. It's like we created this to try to give more of an option for this, and now we're getting lackluster teams as champions, and they're getting annihilated by the at-larges or the bigger names in the conferences. Because now at this point, in my opinion, not just because of the members now, everything goes through the SEC and the Big Ten now. The addition of now you have Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Wisconsin, and a couple other ones, and then some middle of the road teams out there. Penn State, when they are dominant, middle of the road teams of late. Minnesota. These teams have proven themselves. But of course, like I said, Michigan, Ohio State sit atop that. You added USC and then the late emergence. And then, of course, same teams, the SEC. You added Oklahoma and the Texas to go along with the LSUs, the Alabamas, Auburn. Was it Auburn? Is Auburn in the SEC? No. So to go along with those teams, as well as their here middle of the road teams that tend to compete, Carolinas, Kentuckies, and stuff like that. Now they have a strong conference and have strong competitors to go along, and not to be taken away from the ACC or the Big Ten, because I think they're next in the pecking orders when you take in consideration. Oh, Florida in the SEC, Texas A&M in the SEC, now Texas in the SEC, Oklahoma at times in the SEC, or maybe the middle of the road. It's going to be completely different. So now the Florida States, the Clemsons have to do battle, have to make it work. Also saying Ole Miss and South Carolina. So it's definitely a different look. So that's just a couple of things I want to point out and leave you all with for just food for thought going forth as we're getting ready. The season is just around the corner. But we're probably about 2 weeks from the start of the NCAA season. 3 weeks from the start of the NFL season. So, of course, with that being said, I will continue to put it out there, fantasy football. So get what you holler at your boy or myself or Bishop. If you want to get down in the First Formation, second annual fantasy football league, of course, we have some people already couple more I'm willing to add and want to get into, so you can get this thing cracking, popping, crackulating, as I use West Coast terminology. Drunk, I'm trying to give you opportunity, bro. I need you to hit me up, man. If you see this, holla at your boy, so we can get there. So, of course, like I said, I have a couple of appointments to get to. I look forward to seeing y'all. I think we're gonna tap in tomorrow, but have a little different content, as I've been seeing some tournaments and stuff like that, and some stuff, some speculative conversation going on. Maybe we run it back here. In any case, so like I said, a couple of things coming down the pike. Look forward to sharing with y'all soon. Of course, keynotes, of course, keeping in consideration military basketball as an organization, as well as an entity, and in industry or community. All the teams, all the installations, the bases seem to be putting out there. Be sure to check with your local installation to find out when or where, or if they've already had their tryouts for their upcoming seasons, or get with the individuals. If you're having trouble and need some assistance, hit me up. I'll be sure to talk to the right people to put you in the right place. Additionally, as we know, we continue to say, the Military Basketball Association will be having their All-Star game in the coming weeks, slated for September 16th in over in Oklahoma, to be played at Oklahoma City University. So be sure to pull up if you're in around the Oklahoma City area. Opportunity to see some of these players compete. Of course, we know the all service tournaments is coming, as they need. If you haven't got your applications in already, don't fret, get those in. Play all Army basketball, all Navy, all Marine, all Air Force, and be sure to be a part of those teams. Get yourself out there. You don't know until you try, of course. At this point, it has been a pleasure. Look forward to talking to y'all. Holler at y'all tomorrow. Enjoy y'all's week. Today is Wednesday. It's hump day. We're getting over it. Just 2 more days and we're at the weekend again. And we're going to run it back again. It's your boy Trey, the commish. I'll holler at y'all. Peace.